The last stand Velronzix had once been a place of light. The skies were soft blue, the rivers ran clear, and the nights were filled with the glow of 2 moons. But now, those skies were dark. The rivers had turned to ash-filled streams, and the moons were hidden behind thick clouds of smoke for 32 days. The enemy fleet had surrounded the planet. Their warships were huge black and silver shapes that blocked the stars. They fired from orbit, burning cities, crushing defenses, destroying hope every day. The defenders tried to fight back, and every day they lost more ground. Shields over the capital were nearly gone. Every blast from the enemy pushed the power. Levels lower, the food stores were emptying, the medicine almost gone. Families huddled in underground shelters, praying to see another morning. Inside the main command center, the air was thick and hot. Screens flickered with damage reports. Voices called out coordinates, requests for supplies, desperate orders. For retreat, General Curva stood at the center table, his eyes scanning the battle map. Bright red icons showed enemy positions. They surrounded the planet completely. Blue icons, the defenders, were so few now that the map looked almost bare. They will break through by nightfall, the tactical officer said. His voice flat. Curva didn't argue. He already knew. He had been a soldier for 30 years, and he had never seen odds like this. Still, he couldn't tell his people to stop fighting. If Valryn 6 was to fall, it would not fall quietly across the planet. The people had heard the truth. The Galactic Council had sent a final message 2 weeks ago. No help is coming. The words spread like a sickness, draining the last of the courage from many hearts. Some stopped coming to the defense lines. Some chose to hide instead of fight, and some simply waited for the end. The capital city was a shadow of itself. Its tall towers were broken, streets filled with rubble. The great crystal spire in the center, the pride of Valryn 6, was cracked and leaning. Children no longer played in the plaza's shops stood empty, their windows shattered. Only the sound of distant explosions broke the silence. In the command center, alarms began to scream again. The enemy had pushed another wave of attack ships into the atmosphere. Valryn. Fighter pilots rose to meet them, but even the most skilled could not fight forever. The enemy's numbers were endless, and every time a Valryn pilot fell, no one could replace them. General Curva leaned on the table, his claws tapping the surface. "We hold the line here," he said to his officers. "If we fall back any more, the city is lost." The officers nodded, but their eyes were tired. Many had not slept in days. They knew what was coming. And yet they stayed. Hours passed. The enemy closed in tighter. The sky above the capital burned orange with fire from destroyed ships. The shield dome flickered like a candle about to go out. The ground shook with every impact. Dust fell from the ceiling of the command center, and still the enemy pressed forward. In the streets, soldiers fought at barricades. Some used rifles, others only blades. They fought from doorways, from rooftops, from behind broken walls. Each block taken by the enemy was paid for with Valryn blood. But the defenders knew they could not win. They were buying time. But for what? By the third hour of the enemy's push, the defenders' lines were breaking. The command center received reports of positions lost one after another. The enemy was only minutes from breaching the last wall around the capital. People in the shelters wept quietly. Some whispered prayers. Some simply stared at the floor, and the truth settled in. This was the last stand of Valryn 6. Then, just as the night began to fall, something strange happened. The tactical officer's eyes widened. He looked at his radar screen, then at the general. "Sir, we have an incoming signal." Curva turned, frowning. "From where?" "The council. Reinforcements." The officer shook his head. "No. It's coming from deep space." Beyond our sector, the room went silent for weeks. No message had come except enemy demands for surrender. Now there was a pulse of sound. Faint, but growing stronger. Not static, not words. It was a long, low howl like the cry of some great beast echoing through the void. The sound vibrated in the walls, in the floor, in their bones. And with it came a reading. A single ship, small compared to the enemy fleet. But moving fast, very fast. Its engine trail glowed brighter than any they had ever seen. The officer's hands shook as he read the identification code. It was not Velrun, not enemy, not any known ally from the Council. It was human. For a moment, no one spoke. Some in the room did not believe it. Humans had been gone from this region for decades. They were a legend more than a reality. But now, here was proof a human warship. Racing toward them at impossible speed. The howl grew louder, and General Curva felt something he had not felt in weeks. A spark deep in his chest. Hope. The howl from the void was unlike anything the Valron defenders had ever heard. It was not just sound, it was feeling. It seemed to carry weight, like the memory of storms and the call of a hunter before the kill. It moved through the walls of the command center, through the hearts of the people hiding underground. Even those who had given up on living felt it. It was a sound that said something is coming. General Curva leaned over the radar screen, his eyes narrowing. The signal blip was still far beyond the outer moons, but it was closing the distance quickly. Faster than any Velrun or Council ship could move. The enemy fleet had noticed too. Their formations shifted. Some ships turning their sensors toward the incoming unknown. For the first time in weeks, the enemy paused. It was not fear yet, but it was caution. The communications officer worked frantically to lock onto the source of the signal. Static hissed across the speakers. Then cleared. A voice came through, calm but with an edge of steel. This is the Terran warship Vanguard. To Velron Command, hold the line. We are coming. The voice spoke in Galactic Common, but the tone carried something else. Something that made the hairs rise on the back of the neck. This was not a polite council diplomat. This was a warrior. And whoever commanded this ship did not sound like someone who had arrived too late. Curva's mind turned to the old stories. Decades ago, humans had fought in the wars of the Shattered Belt. They had entered the fight late, but when they came with fury. They were a small power compared to the great empires, yet their warships had a reputation, not for size, but for what they did when outnumbered. And now, one of those warships was heading straight toward an enemy fleet 10 times its size. The officers in the room exchanged looks. Some were skeptical. What could one ship do against so many? Others felt a strange spark of energy. Even the tired, wounded soldiers in the medical bay whispered when they heard the word Terran out in orbit. The enemy fleet moved into a new formation. Their largest ships began shifting to block the direct approach to Valron 6, gun batteries turned, missile pods armed. They were preparing to meet the unknown before it could reach the planet. But the Vanguard did not slow down. Its engine signature burned bright white. Like a star tearing across the darkness, sensors picked up strange energy spikes from the ship on familiar readings. Dangerous in scale, it was not using standard approach patterns. Instead, it was moving in a weaving, almost predatory path, as if it were hunting before even reaching the fight. In the streets of the capital, civilians began to gather outside the shelters. They could not see the warship yet, but the howling signal was now being broadcast openly. Children clung to their parents, listening to the strange, deep sound. Some were afraid, some smiled for the first time in weeks. The sound didn't feel like fear, it felt like a promise. Inside the command center, Curva's second officer approached. General P, if this human ship fails, the enemy will crush us before nightfall. Curva nodded. I know, but if they are coming this far, this fast, they are not planning to fail. Another burst of communication came through. This time, it was short, sharp. Velron command, mark your defense points. Feed us targeting data. We're going in hot. The tactical officer quickly sent the planet's defense grid information. Every active shield generator, every artillery position, every enemy cluster still inside the atmosphere, everything. Then something happened that no one in the room expected. The Vanguard broadcast an open channel not just to the Velron forces, but to the enemy fleet. The voice was the same calm, firm, but now it carried an icy edge. You have one chance to leave this system. Refuse, and you will not leave at all. The enemy commander replied with static and laughter. Through intercepted channels, Valran intelligence picked up fragments. One ship, a Terran relic. Tear it apart. They were not taking the threat seriously. But General Curva had seen enough battles to know when an enemy was making a mistake. They underestimated what they didn't understand, and humans were rarely understood. The blip on the radar grew larger. Then the first image from the deep space cameras came through. A dark shape against the stars, sharp and angular. Its hull bore scars of old battles, markings in white letters spelled out its name Vanguard, and on its prow, painted in deep crimson, was the image of a wolf's head, its mouth open, mid-howl. The howl from the speakers rose in volume until it filled every corner of the command center. It wasn't music, it wasn't codet, it was a war cry. The enemy ships began to move faster. Repositioning, Velron ground forces tensed. Something was about to happen. In the silence between breaths, General Curva spoke. Open all channels. I want the whole planet to hear this. The howl echoed out, carried across every comm network, and in that moment, the people of Velron 6 understood they were not alone anymore, far above the burning skies. The human warship roared toward the enemy like a predator closing in on prey. The void between the stars had answered their call for help. And it had answered with fury, long before the siege of Velron 6. The name human had been spoken in whispers, not whispers of fear, though some feared them, but whispers of awe. For the Velron people, humans were part of half-forgotten stories, told by elders in dim-lit rooms, tales of warriors who came from a small blue planet far beyond the trade lanes. Tales of battles where humans stood when every other army fled. Tales where they did not fight for territory or wealth, but for the people who needed them in the capital's underground shelters. As the howling signal from the Vanguard filled the air, the oldest survivors began to speak. Children huddled around them. Soldiers leaned closer. Even the wounded listened. One elderly Velron, his scales pale with age, spoke softly. I saw them once in the War of the Shattered Belt. I was a boy then, hiding on my homeworld. Our fleets were broken. The enemy laughed at us, and then the humans came. Their ships looked like nothing we had ever seen, not graceful like ours, not huge like the Council's, but they moved like they were alive, like they could smell the blood of their prey. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with memory. They fought with a fire that made the void itself seem bright. They took hits that should have torn them apart, and still they fought. And when the battle was done, they didn't demand payment. They didn't take our resources. They just left, as if helping was all they had come for. General Curva had heard these stories too, in military training. Some officers dismissed them as romantic myths, exaggerations, told by grateful allies. But the veterans knew humans were real. And their way of war was unlike anyone else's. They did not measure victory by numbers or size. They measured it by who was still alive at the end in the command center. The Vanguard's approach was now minutes away. The enemy fleet had formed a wall of ships to block it. Dozens of destroyers and cruisers lined up like an iron curtain. Against such numbers, even the bravest captain would have slowed down. But the human ship only increased speed. The tactical officer leaned toward Curva. His voice low. Sir, they can't win. not against that many. Curva's gaze stayed fixed on the radar. That's what the enemy thinks, and that's why they will lose. In another corner of the galaxy, humans were spoken of as Deathworlders. Beings from a planet so dangerous that their own survival had shaped them into predators. Their bodies were built for endurance. Their minds adapted for sudden violence, and their instincts to protect their own run deeper than most could. Understand, the younger officers in the command center didn't know the full truth. They only knew what they had been told in passing, that humans had left Council space years ago. Some said it was because they didn't trust the politics. Others said they had gone back to their home system to prepare for something, but no one really knew. And now, here they were again, appearing in the hour of Valrin's greatest need. In the shelter under the East Plaza, a mother told her daughter a simpler version of the human legend. "They are like the wolves in our mountains," she said, stroking the girl's crest. "They protect their pack, even if they must face the storm alone. And sometimes, their pack is bigger than blood." The little girl listened, eyes wide. "Are we their pack now?" she asked. The mother hesitated, hearing the howl over the speakers. "Yes," she said. "Yes, we are." Out in orbit, the enemy's lead ships locked weapons on the incoming target. Missile hatches opened, plasma cannons swiveled into place. The void seemed to hold its breath, and still the Vanguard came on, the glow of its engines now brighter than the burning cities below. Through the long-range cameras, Valrin crews caught sight of its hall markings. And there it was, painted on the proud the wolf's head. Mouth open, mid-howl, Curva's mind went back to an old war record he had studied as a young officer. It had been about a single human cruiser, the Resolute, holding a jump gate against an entire pirate armada. The humans had fought for 19 hours without pause. When the last pirate ship fled, the Resolute had less than 5% hull integrity. Its captain had been wounded, half the crew was gone, but the gate had held, and the system behind it was safe. Curva wondered if the Vanguard's captain had read the same record, or if this was simply what humans did: see a battle worth fighting, and throw themselves into it without hesitation. The howl from the speakers deepened. Not a single note of fear was in it. It was a sound made to remind the enemy that they were prey. The civilians in the shelters stopped crying. The soldiers at the barricades straightened their backs. And somewhere in the burning streets of the capital, the thought began to spread like fire: we might live. Up above, the Vanguard crossed the outer moon. Enemy missiles fired, streaking toward it in a deadly storm. But instead of slowing, the human warship tilted slightly. Engines flaring brighter, it dove straight into the attack. The old stories had been true. Humans did not wait for safety. They made it. The Vanguard did not arrive in silence. It came screaming into the battle, not with words, but with a voice older than the stars. The howl thundered across every frequency. It was deep, it was long, and it was alive. It rolled through the void like the cry of a predator announcing the hunt. Valrin soldiers froze mid-breath. Enemy crews looked up from their consoles. It was not just sound. It was a warning in the command center. General Curva felt the vibration in his chest. It was not a pleasant sound, yet it made his blood run hot. It was the sound of something that was not afraid to die. The Vanguard's hull glinted in the dying light of Valrin's twin moons. Its sharp angles seemed to cut through the darkness. Every inch of it spoke of survival, patched armor, old battle scars, weapon ports that looked like they'd been rebuilt a dozen times. This was not a parade ship. This was a survivor. The enemy fleet tightened formation. They had the numbers. They had the firepower. And they believed they had the advantage. Rows of plasma turrets rotated to face the lone warship. Their missile bays began to glow as they prepared to fire. But the Vanguard did not slow. If anything, it accelerated. The howl grew louder, deeper. until it drowned out the static on every Velran com channel. Target lock achieved, the Velran tactical officer reported. Curva shook his head. No. They're not waiting for us. They're going in first. The first barrage came from the Anomia storm of missiles and plasma bolts lighting up the void. The Velron crews winced, expecting the human ship to take heavy damage, but the Vanguard did not move like other ships. It rolled sideways, dove under the missile path, and surged forward. Its counterfire was immediate bright blue lances of kinetic slugs tearing into the nearest enemy destroyer. The impact was so violent that the destroyer's hull crumpled like paper. Its engines going dark in seconds. Velran eyes widened. No. Council ship could kill a destroyer that fast. Not alone, not head-on. The enemy realized too late that the howl was not just noise, it was their death knell. Their formation broke as smaller ships tried to scatter, but scattering only made them easier to pick off. The Vanguard twisted and spun between them like a knife in a crowd. Each shot it fired hit exactly where it needed to. Engines, bridge towers, reactor cores, random, always final. From the ground, Velran defenders looked up through the smoky skies. At first, they thought they were seeing falling stars. But then they saw the explosions, enemy wreckage burning as it fell into the atmosphere. Cheers broke out in the streets. People cried out the word human like it was a prayer. Inside the enemy flagship, the commander shouted orders to focus. Fire on the human warship. Every available cannon turned toward it. Hundreds of plasma bolts streaked through space. The Vanguard's shields flared bright. Some shots hit, some burned into armor. But the ship didn't falter. It roared straight through the firestorm. Then, the Vanguard unleashed something no one expected. Its forward cannon opened, charging. With a glow that lit the void, Velran radar registered a spike in energy unlike anything in their database when the shot fired. It was not a beam, it was a spear of white light. It tore through an enemy cruiser's bow, cutting it clean in. The halves drifted apart, burning, before the explosion consumed them both. Curva's claws dug into the table. That's not standard council tech, he muttered. His second officer leaned closer. No, sir. That's human tech. The howl came again. This time it was not a single note, but a rolling, rising call. It was as if the ship itself was alive. Velran com officers noticed something strange. The enemy's open channels were in chaos. Voices shouted over one another, some demanded retreat, others screamed for reinforcements. Fear was in their tone now. Down in the shelters, people were standing instead of hiding. They were listening. Every time the howl came, they felt braver. It was not just the sound of a ship, it was the sound of a promise being kept. The Vanguard did not stop moving. It cut across the flank of the enemy formation, taking out 2 more destroyers in quick bursts. It looped around the largest cruiser, letting loose a spread of torpedoes that dug deep into the ship's belly. The explosion lit the void in gold and white. Velran fighters, inspired, began to launch from hidden bays. They joined the fight, covering the human ship's sides as it tore deeper into enemy lines. By now, the enemy commander's voice was breaking. Over the intercepted channels, kill that ship. Kill it now. But every attempt was too slow. The Vanguard seemed to know where they would fire before they fired. It moved like a predator among prey, relentless, unstoppable, certain. The howl came one last time in that opening clash. It was louder than before, layered with the echo of destruction in its wake. Another enemy vessel shattered under the human ship's guns. The void was now littered with burning wrecks. The balance of the battle was shifting, and every Velron watching knew. The tide had turned. The Vanguard was no longer just a warship in the battle. It had become the battle. Every movement it made reshaped the fight. Every shot it fired sent shockwaves through the enemy's formation. From the ground, Velran soldiers could see the bright flashes in the sky. Each one was another enemy ship. Falling, the defenders on the barricades shouted and pointed as burning wreckage streaked across the clouds. Even the youngest recruits, shaking from exhaustion, found themselves standing taller. They were no longer fighting just to die slowly. They were fighting to hold on, because now they had a chance. In orbit, the Vanguard dove into the heart of the enemy fleet. Its forward guns spat streams of glowing kinetic slugs. Each slug punched through armor like paper on the left flank. An enemy destroyer tried to bring its broadside cannons to bear. The human ship rolled beneath it. 2 quick bursts from its rail batteries tore the destroyer's engines apart. The enemy vessel spun helplessly before exploding in a silent flash. The enemy fleet was bleeding ships, but they still outnumbered the human warship many times over. They tried swarming it, cutting off its escape routes. The Vanguard did not escape. It attacked. The human captain ordered a burn straight through the tightening enemy circle. Engines roared. Shields flared. The Vanguard cut a path like a blade slicing through cloth. Point defense turrets tracked and destroyed incoming missiles before they could touch the hull. Every few seconds, its secondary cannons fired in perfect rhythm. 1 shot, 1 kill, Velron fighter wings, seeing the human ship's pattern, joined the charge. They flew in tight formation alongside the Vanguard. Their small craft darted in and out, hitting targets the larger guns could not reach. It was chaos for the enemy. Suddenly, the hunters had become the hunted, inside the enemy flagship. The commander's voice cracked with rage. "They're only 1 ship. Stop them." But the truth was dawning on every enemy officer in that fleet. They were not fighting 1 ship. They were fighting 1 human ship. And that meant numbers alone would not save them. The Vanguard unleashed a wave of torpedoes from its underside. Bays. Each torpedo split mid-flight into a cluster of smaller warheads. The enemy's point defense systems could not track them all. One by one, enemy cruisers vanished in blossoms of white and orange light. In the command center on Velron 6, General Curva's voice was firm for the first time in weeks. "Send everything we have left. Support the human ship." The remaining Velron frigates rose from the planet's surface, damaged, low on ammunition, but determined. They moved to guard the Vanguard's flanks. For the first time since the siege began, Velron and human fought side by side. The enemy responded with desperation. A cluster of heavy cruisers broke formation, aiming to ram the Vanguard, the human. Captains saw them coming. Rather than evade, the warship turned to meet them. Its prow-mounted railgun charged with a blinding white glow. 1 shot fired. The lead cruiser split in 2 before it could even fire. The rest tried to break away, but the Vanguard's secondary batteries tore them apart before they could flee. The battle was no longer evenly matched. The enemy's lines were collapsing, yet the Vanguard kept pressing. Every burst of fire from its guns was placed with precision. Every maneuver cut deeper into enemy strength. It fought not like a blunt hammer, but like a scalpel leech strike, deliberate each kill necessary down below. Velron civilians filled the streets. They looked up at the sky. Every explosion above was greeted with cheers. Some raised their hands as if to reach for the distant warship. The howl that had once sounded strange now felt like the heartbeat of their survival. Back in orbit, the enemy tried one last coordinated strike. A half-dozen ships moved in from all sides. Missiles and plasma fire rained toward the human vessel. The Vanguard's shields flared white. For a heartbeat, the ship disappeared in the glow, and then it emerged, still moving, still firing. The forward guns tore through 2 ships in quick succession, a spinning barrel of death in the middle of the void. The howl came again. This time, it was not just a sound, it was a statement. "We are here, we are not leaving, and you will fall. The enemies will finally broke." Scattered ships began to pull back. Some fled toward the edges of the system. Others powered down weapons and tried to run silent. But the Vanguard was not done. It chased the retreating ships, cutting down any that tried to regroup. It did not leave the hunt unfinished. The Valron defenders knew then what the old stories had meant. Humans did not simply win battles, they ended them. And when they fought for you, they fought as if your survival was their own. By the time the enemy's retreat became a full rout, the space above Valron 6 was littered with burning wreckage. The Vanguard slowed, its engines dimmed slightly, but its presence still filled the void. It had fought like fire and steel combined. And in doing so, it had given an entire world back its hope. For 32 days, Valron 6 had been losing ground. Every battle before this had been a slow retreat. Every hour had been another step toward defeat. But now, the tide was shifting, and everyone could feel it. The space above the planet, once filled with enemy guns, was now broken and scattered. The black and silver wall of ships had holes in it. Through those holes, the defenders could see the stars. Again, Valron pilots who had been hiding in the planet's shadow now launched into the fight. Their small fighters darted like insects between the larger ships, picking at the enemy's weak points, covering each other, and all of it was built around the movement of the Vanguard. The human warship was still at the center. Its presence was like a burning sun in the middle of the battle. Every maneuver it made pulled enemy attention away from the Valron frigates. Every shot it fired opened a gap for the defenders to strike through. The howl from its speakers had not stopped. It rolled across the void like a heartbeat that belonged to the whole fleet now. General Curva stood tall in the command center for the first time in weeks. His voice was not issuing orders for retreat. Instead, he barked commands for attack. Squadron 3, push on the eastern flank. Squadron 6, cover the vanguards. Tail, all artillery target the ships trapped between us and the humans. Do not let them escape. The Valron forces were moving with energy that hadn't existed just an hour ago. Even damaged ships were returning to the fight, some limping forward on half power, others missing sections of armor. But no one wanted to be left out of this moment. They had been given a chance, and they would not waste it out in orbit. The enemy was struggling to regain control. Their command network was a mess. Orders contradicted each other. Some captains called for a retreat. Others demanded an all-out push to crush the human ship. But the longer they argued, the more ground they lost. The Vanguard made sure of that. Its captain drove it straight into the thickest cluster of enemy vessels. Not recklessly, but with purpose. Valron interceptors swarmed alongside it. The combined fire tore through enemy hulls in bursts of white light. Every time a ship went up in flames, the defenders cheered over the cum channels. On the surface, civilians had left the shelters. They stood in the streets, heads tilted up to watch the night sky burn with flashes of war. Children pointed and gasped each time they saw a streak of falling wreckage. For them, the fear of the siege had been replaced with something else, something they had not dared to feel in weeks' hope. In one corner of the battle, 3 enemy destroyers tried to regroup for a counterattack. The Vanguard saw them. It veered sharply, its side guns roaring to life. 2 of the destroyers erupted into fire instantly. The third tried to run. A Valron frigate's hull, scorched and half its crew wounded, moved to block its escape. The Vanguard finished it with a single railgun shot through the bridge. The coordination between human and Valron forces grew tighter with every passing minute. It was as if they had been fighting together for years. The Vanguard's movements were precise. It seemed to know where the Valron ships would be before they even got there, and the Valrons trusted it completely. Enemy losses began stacking faster. First, heavy cruiser lost its engines and drifted powerless. Then 2 frigates collided while trying to evade a torpedo spread. A battleship tried to turn its massive guns on the Vanguard. But the human ship dove under its firing arc and fired a full torpedo volley into its reactor. The explosion lit up the void, casting a golden light over the debris field. General Curva's second officer leaned closer. "Sir, they're breaking. If we press now, we can finish this." Curva nodded slowly. "Then we press, for every life they took. For every day they made us suffer." The final push began. Velran ships surged forward. The Vanguard led the charge. The howl it sent this time was different, faster, more urgent, like the final sprint of a predator closing in on its prey. Enemy ships peeled away. Some jettisoned escape pods. Others powered down entirely, hoping to be spared. But the human captain didn't waste shots on those who surrendered. Every gun was aimed only at the ones still fighting. It was efficient, brutal, and unstoppable in less than an hour. The space above Velran 6 was theirs again. The last active enemy vessel, a lone frigate, turned tail and fled into the black. No one chased it. There was no need. The message had already been sent. Velran 6 was alive. And it had been saved by the howl from the void in the command center. Cheers erupted. Some officers laughed. Others wept openly. Curva allowed himself a long breath, but his eyes stayed on the screen showing the Vanguard. The human warship floated now among the wreckage. Its guns silent, its engines dim, but even in stillness, it looked like it was watching. Guarding. The tide had turned, and the people of Velran knew they owed that turn to the humans, to one ship. To one howl that had changed everything. The battle was over. The void above Velran 6 was no longer filled with enemy fire. It was quiet now. Only the drifting wrecks of enemy ships, the faint glow of damaged hulls, and the slow pulse of navigational lights remained. The Vanguard floated in the middle of it all. Its armor was scorched. Sections of its plating were dented and torn, but it still looked unbroken. Like a predator that had just finished the hunt and now stood watch over its kill, General Curva watched from the command center. He could feel the weight lifting from the planet. The long weeks of fear, hunger, and despair were finally ending. Yet, as much as he wanted to speak to the humans, to thank them, he noticed something strange. The Vanguard wasn't moving toward the Velran docking bays. It was holding position, silent, down on the surface. The people gathered in the open plazas. They looked up at the night sky. Some pointed at the bright speck where the human warship hung. Children asked if the humans would come down, if they would walk the streets and let the people see the faces. Of their saviors, no one had the answer. Velran repair crews scrambled to tend to their own damaged ships. Pilots returned from the fight, exhausted but alive. Many of them spoke on the comm channels, sending thanks to the Vanguard. The human ship never replied. It only kept drifting slowly among the debris, its lights faint but steady. Curva sent a direct hail. Terran warship Vanguard. This is General Curva of Velran 6. Your actions saved our world. If you will come to the surface, we will honor you as heroes. Static answered him at first. Then, a voice came through comm. Steady, but distant. General, your world is safe now. That's all the honor we need. Curva tried again. You fought for us when no one else would. Why? We have nothing to give you. There was a short pause before the human replied. You called for help, and someone had to answer. The words were simple, but they stayed with Curva. He wanted to ask more about who they were, about where they had come from, but before he could, the Vanguard's engines flared to life. The warship began to turn, slowly angling toward the dark edges of the system on the surface. The people watched as the human ship shifted position. A low murmur spread through the crowds. Some shouted for it to stay. Others whispered that the humans were needed somewhere. Else a few believed the warship would return one day, if called. Velran pilots offered to escort the Vanguard to the system's edge. The humans declined. Keep your strength for your own defense, was their only answer as the warship moved. The howl came one last time. It was softer now, less a battle cry, and more a farewell. It rolled gently across every frequency. Echoing through the comm systems, civilians stopped what they were doing to listen. Some closed their eyes, others raised their hands to the sky. It felt like the ship was speaking without words, saying, "You are safe." "Remember us." General Curva stood in silence as he listened. In all his years of service, he had never felt such a mix of pride and humility. The humans had fought like no one else could, and now they were leaving without asking for reward, without even giving their names. The Vanguard's engines burned brighter. It slipped past the last fragments of enemy wreckage and entered the blackness between the stars. Within minutes, it was nothing more than a point of light. Within an hour, it was gone. The people of Velron stayed in the plazas long after. Some began telling their children what had happened. Others swore they would remember the howl for the rest of their lives. Already, the stories were forming how a lone human ship had come howling from the void. How it had torn through an enemy fleet and turned certain defeat into victory. How it had left as quietly as it had arrived. In the command center, Curva turned to his officers. "We will rebuild," he said. "We will be ready if they ever come again, and if the humans need us. We will answer." The officers nodded. They all knew the truth now, that humans were not like the rest of the galaxy. They fought not for conquest, not for politics, but for something older and simpler. A promise that night. The skies over Velron 6 were clear for the first time in weeks. The stars shone bright, and among them was a patch of empty black where the Vanguard had vanished. No one knew where it had gone, but everyone knew what it had left behind. Not just a saved world, not just the wreckage of an enemy fleet, but a memory that would outlive them all, the memory of fire and steel. And the sound of a howl that had come from the void, a sound that meant salvation.